Late on a gray Saturday afternoon, the Griffins decided to visit the giant mall outside of Quahog. The kind of mall with flickering lights, broken claw machines, and a food court that smelled like burnt grease and old mop water. Humanity keeps building temples to consumerism, and somehow every one of them ends up smelling like wet socks. Family Guy Peter was excited because the mall had a bacon festival weekend, which was apparently just 6 food stands selling the same pig in different shapes. Lois already regretted coming before they even parked. Chris shuffled behind everyone, hands in his hoodie pocket. Meg complained about her feet hurting, despite having walked 12 feet. Stewie insulted a toddler for wearing Velcro shoes. Brian just wanted coffee strong enough to erase his memories. Inside the mall, the family split up. Lois, Meg, and Stewie headed toward the food court, while Peter dragged Chris and Brian toward a sporting goods store. "Dad, can we check out the arcade?" Chris asked. Peter rubbed his chin. "Maybe later, Chris. First, I gotta look at grills I'll never buy." Brian sighed. This is how middle-aged men simulate purpose. As they wandered, Chris noticed a small restaurant tucked in the corner of the mall. The sign buzzed weakly overhead. Half the letters were burned out. Barney's Breakfast. Inside, nobody was there. No workers, no customers, just a horrible smell. Chris stepped inside while Peter stared at a display of novelty spatulas nearby. The lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. Behind the counter, Chris found crates of rotten eggs stacked beside the kitchen. Black stains leaked from cracked shells. The smell was unbearable. "Holy crap," Chris muttered. Peter walked in behind him and immediately grinned. "Chris, you know what this means?" Brian looked disturbed. "No, Peter, no." 5 minutes later, Peter and Chris stood over the second-floor balcony of the mall, holding armfuls of rotten eggs. Below them, Lois sat with Meg and Stewie at a table in the food court. Peter whispered like a criminal mastermind with brain damage. "Target acquired." The eggs flew. Splat! One exploded across Lois's shoulder. Another burst in Meg's hair. The smell hit the food court instantly. People screamed and backed away. Lois slowly stood up, yolk dripping from her face. Peter immediately pointed at Chris. "It was him!" "Dad!" Lois stormed upstairs like a furious demon wearing capri pants. "Chris Griffin!" People turned to stare as Lois grabbed Chris by the arm. "You are grounded for a month!" Peter's face twisted angrily. "Oh, come on, Lois. It was funny. You threw rotten eggs at me in public. It built character. It built salmonella." The argument echoed through the mall. Shoppers watched nervously as Peter and Lois screamed inches from each other's faces. Even Brian looked uncomfortable. That night, the ride home was silent. Chris sat in the back seat, staring out the window while rain tapped softly against the glass. When they got home, Lois immediately sent him upstairs. No TV, no games, no junk food. Chris nodded silently and walked to his room. Slam! He threw himself onto the bed and cried into his pillow. Not because of being grounded, because for the first time in a long while, it felt like his family genuinely hated each other. Eventually, he cried himself to sleep. Then the nightmares began. At first, Chris woke up in darkness. His room looked wrong. The walls stretched higher than normal. The posters peeled like rotten skin. Moonlight leaked through the curtains in thin, gray strips. Then he heard it, a soft voice from inside his closet. "Chris?" He froze. The voice sounded old, weak, breathing heavily. "Chris, come here." Slowly, trembling, Chris stepped toward the closet. The door creaked open. Inside stood a twisted version of Herbert, its body bent unnaturally. Its jaw hung too wide. Yellow teeth poked through torn gums. Its cloudy eyes bulged from their sockets, while its skin looked melted and wet. "Need a popsicle, Chris?" The thing lunged. Chris screamed and ran. The house was empty. No Peter, no Lois, no Brian, no Stewie. Only darkness. Herbert chased him through endless hallways while his cane scraped against the floor. Clack, clack, clack. "Come back, Chris!" Doors slammed shut around him. The walls oozed black stains. Family photos twisted into horrible images of screaming faces. Then Herbert grabbed his shoulder. Chris woke up screaming. Sweat soaked his bed. The clock read 3:14 a.m. Every night after that became worse. One dream showed Lois towering over him with giant black eyes, screaming insults while the walls shook. Another featured the evil monkey from the closet crawling across the ceiling with long, spider-like limbs. Evil monkey. One nightmare trapped Chris in a classroom with distorted versions of his ex-girlfriends staring silently at him while their mouths slowly stretched wider and wider until blood dripped from their smiles. Teen nightmares apparently run on humiliation and unresolved emotions. The human brain really is a broken carnival ride. Sometimes he escaped. Sometimes the creatures caught him. Whenever they did, he always woke up unable to breathe for a few seconds. After 2 weeks, Chris looked exhausted. Pale skin, dark circles under his eyes, barely talking. Peter finally noticed while eating cereal directly from the box. "Geez, Chris, you look like Brian after taxes." Chris hesitated. Then he told him everything. The nightmares, the creatures, the voices. Peter surprisingly didn't laugh. Instead, his expression slowly changed. "Chris," Peter muttered quietly, "I know what this is." Chris blinked. "You do?" Peter nodded. "When I was a kid, after my dad yelled at me real bad, I started having nightmares too. Stuff in the dark, things chasing me. Sometimes when your brain gets loaded with fear and anger, it sorta turns against itself." Brian overheard from the kitchen. "That's actually weirdly insightful." Peter ignored him. "You gotta stop running from it, Chris. That's the trick. Dreams know when you're scared." Chris looked uncertain. "So, what do I do?" Peter leaned forward. "Fight back." That night, Chris fell asleep, terrified. The nightmare returned immediately. He stood once again in the dark hallway. The monkey crouched at the end of it. Herbert emerged from the shadows. Lois's distorted voice echoed through the house. But this time, Chris didn't run. His legs shook violently. Still, he stood there. "No," Chris whispered. The creatures paused. "You're not real." Herbert snarled and charged. Chris grabbed a lamp from a nearby table and smashed it across Herbert's face. The creature collapsed with a horrible screech. The monkey lunged from the ceiling. Chris tackled it to the ground. The hallway shook violently as the nightmares screamed around him. "You don't control me anymore," Chris shouted. One by one, the monsters began melting into black smoke. The walls stopped shaking. The house became normal again. And for the first time in weeks, silence. Chris woke up the next morning, breathing calmly. Sunlight poured through his curtains. Downstairs, Peter burned pancakes while Lois yelled at him for using a spatula on the toaster. Normal. Stupid. Loud. But normal. Chris smiled a little. And that night, for the first time in a long time, he slept without fear.